Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Brawling Pit, where we talk everything about Brawl, a standard legal commander format. I'm with your host, Johnathan Tang. Joining me on the line is Jacob.
Sup?
So what are we going to talk about today, Jacob?
No idea. What are we going to talk about?
So today we're going to talk about how to look at your commander and identify how to build around the commander, how to make the commander good. In order to do that, we need to talk about the archetypes of Magic the Gathering. As a comp player yourself, can you tell us what the different archetypes there are?
Well, this is kind of an arbitrary answer, but...
Just super high level.
Right. So, in general, most players would consider there to be about 4 different archetypes. I mean, more or less depending on who you ask, but basically, your decks are going to boil down to being very aggressive, low to ground, and they'll be called aggro. Mid-range, where they can kind of go either way, and control. The strengths of aggro is that they're very low to the ground, as mentioned, and they're able to get under the decks before they're able to stabilize. The mid-range decks are able to go bigger than the aggressive decks, and they prey on them quite frequently, and they can also get some fast starts and go under control, although this isn't as frequent, and control is designed specifically to beat out mid-range decks. And what happens is that this creates like a triangle, like a rock, paper, scissors environment. And the 4th archetype that's very common is called combo. Now, I would personally argue that combo is a derivative of control, because the combo player just plays very defensively until they're ready to go off. But a lot of players would separate the two, because there is a fair bit of distinction. Where they're different is combo players play very differently in their respective endgame.
Alright, so let's dive into each of these archetypes. And quickly, let's start with aggro. So Jacob, you're quite an aggro player yourself. I believe you're like called Jacob the Quick.
You know, that's the first time I've heard that. I like it though.
Oh, really?
But it has a nice ring to it.
Okay.
Well, I've played through my time. I've played a lot of different decks, and I've basically I think I've hit a critical point of playtime of each of these decks. But aggro, I've definitely spent the most time on. So aggro, as I've mentioned, is very, very low to the ground. The goal is to offset and defeat the opponent before they have a time to, I guess in the case of Magic, to play their lands and get their big spells online. Because right. Since we're getting a little theoretical, the creature efficiency in aggro decks are typically significantly higher per mana cost. That's one of the big goals when trying to decide what creatures to put in an aggressive deck, is knowing how efficient your creatures are. Now, efficiency isn't everything. As you'll see with the control decks and their hyper late game threats, they are not mana efficient at all, but the ceiling of those, on the power level of those cards, are insanely high, but they're not efficient at all, and that's what lets us aggro players get under them.
Right, you definitely want speed over strength.
Absolutely.
That's the way I would put it. Yeah, like you said, we want to overwhelm the opponent and deal as much damage as possible early. But how do you close out the game? Like, when they start to stabilize on like turn 4, turn 5, play some threats to, effectively they can block every one of your creature. What do you do?
Well, that depends on the deck, but those games are the hardest. What I really would like to see happen is the change in mindset of the players. You always hear about players complaining, oh, that the red guy ran me over or whatever, but it's not very frequent that the aggro player gets such a fast start like that. Typically, most games are usually close fought. The only examples, though, that stick in people's minds are the ones where the aggro player just had everything, when in reality that's not the case usually, unless you're playing a deck that is very susceptible to getting run over like control.
Right, there's definitely the confirmation bias there. Like,
absolutely.
You only remember the times when you lost. You don't really remember when you won. Like, oh, I won, of course I won. But like, when you lost, you're like, oh man, it's that red player again.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would say aggressive decks, though, are probably the hardest decks to pilot well.
Why is that?
So, as I mentioned, you have a lot of high-powered cards in mid-range and control decks. the ceiling, the maximum power and effectiveness of each card is significantly higher in those decks than they are in aggro. Because of these high power level cards, you have a lot of get out of jail free cards. For example, as control, if you have an early sweeper like a turn 4 board wipe, you can make a lot of mistakes up till turn 4, but as long as you played your land and you play the sweeper on turn 4, that's one of your big get out of jail free cards against aggressive based decks. And if the aggressive player would run out of gas after that, then it didn't matter that you misplayed turn 1 through 3. You still had that turn 4 sweeper to win the game.
Yeah, I think so too.
Additionally, those type of decks typically play more card draw, and aggro doesn't. So the effectiveness of cards, once again in a theoretical sense, the effectiveness of cards is much higher in aggro decks. So throwing away one card or misplaying and I guess effectively throwing away a card in aggro is much more punishing than it is in control, because you can always just draw more of that same card or a similar type of card in those higher end decks.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a much smaller margin of error.
Exactly.
So, do you have any example, like back in your day when you were actually playing comp? How do you identify if a trade is good or not? Like, if someone's swinging at you and you somehow you have something untapped, when do you block and when do you not block? And when do you go for it?
Well, typically, you don't usually end up in a position to block when you're playing an aggressive deck, but it can happen. It happens more frequently than people think. At that point, a lot of assumptions have to be made. If you're at the point where you have to consider actually blocking and not just like, oh, I played a creature, he doesn't have haste, he has a guy and he's swinging in because for whatever reason, maybe his guy has haste or the opponent thinks they can race you or something, which isn't that unlikely. There does come a time where the aggro player actually has to stop and consider, wait, do I block here? Obviously, if you're going to die if you don't block, that's a pretty easy choice there, but a lot of math has to be done. You have to predict and assume a lot of things. So, for example, when I played, I played against all of the siege rhinos in my day. So, if my opponent was attacking me with their siege rhinos, I had to think, well, they're attacking with the siege rhino, they probably have another one, or they have some other blocker, so I can plan the combat math, including some sort of blocker or a lot of removal, and you just have to really try to hypothesize, can I erase him? And if the answer is you can't erase him, then you probably need to start blocking and hope to draw running burn spells or something.
I see. So yeah, that's the aggro archetype. So why don't we give some example of cards that people would use in aggro decks? Here's a commander for you. So Smooth Voice of Descent. 3 red-green for a legendary creature human warrior. She's a 3/4. She has Flash, Double Strike, Vigilance, Haste. Other creatures you control have haste, and she also has white, tap, untap another target creature.
Just looking at this artwork, I think the most deadly part about this card is the Flash. Like, if you got flashed by this person in the street, like, you'd go blind.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so you're right, that the Flash is definitely the tasty part here, right? I love the Flash because you can just have 5 mana untap, you draw, you play your land, you pass. And then, you can just play her as a blocker. But I think rather than playing her as a blocker, most of the time, on turn 5, you play her, you swing in, and then thereafter you just have things that have haste. She's really versatile. I think she's really powerful as well. What do you think?
I think if you have a very aggressive curve, that's very possible. But the one thing that she does have is she gives all your other dudes haste, and I think it would be very valuable to guarantee to be able to untap with her, such that you can play your 6-drop on curve with haste. And so to better ensure that you get to untap with your leader, I think you may even want to generally hold this. Now, obviously, this depends on your build. Maybe 5 is your top end. Maybe you don't have a better creature in your hand, and this is the best thing you've got. In that case, absolutely, go ahead. Turn 5, play this guy out. Swing in, double strike, vigilance, haste, and get some commander damage in. Oh, wait, no, that's okay.
There's no commander damage in Brawl, so
um,
but you're right, it's a lot of damage still.
But if you got like a 6-drop in your hand and it doesn't have haste, but it's a big dude, I actually think you may want to just hang on to this guy. And by hang on to this guy, I mean just let him chill out in the command zone until end of turn of the guy before you, just so you can guarantee that you get that or better guarantee that you get the static ability of your team having haste. I think that's really important.
I see. Well, how important do you think that the Naya color plays into aggro? Like, cause most aggro decks are mono red, right?
Not usually. So, typically people do associate red with the aggressive decks because red has a lot of direct damage. It has the most direct damage of all the colors in Magic, and typically most of their, or excuse me, they're the color with the most haste creatures. So it very rightfully so, red is associated with aggro, and that is typically true. Red usually is the aggressive deck, but aggressive decks come in all shapes and sizes, literally, and colors. For example, I know there were a few metas where standard the aggressive deck was a blue-white Flyers deck. Had no red.
Whoa.
Yeah, had no red. Another aggro deck back in when Theros was in standard was mono black aggro. No red in there.
Oh, I remember that, but that's because Gary is the format.
It was crazy. I think some played Gary. I don't remember if all of them played them or not. I want to say not all of them played them, but regardless, like it was a powerful deck. And there was no red in it. To be fair, though, I think most aggressive decks in Constructed usually end up having some sort of red. However, in this case for our Brawl format, I think that the green-white will actually be more important than the red.
The green-white?
Yes.
The cats?
I'm not sure about the cats, but green-white typically is a mixture of efficient yet somewhat big creature sizes for their costs.
I see.
So, and the white.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think the green and white will help Samut stay relevant.
Oh, you mean in the context of a commander? Oh my gosh. Okay, that makes sense.
I think yes. In the context of this format, I think the green and white will help this deck stay relevant in the mid and late game, and not just run out of gas.
I see. Yeah, so the aggro archetype actually requires some early good games card, to actually overwhelm the opponent. What are some cards that are good early?
Well, we can just look at some of this current standard staples right now. So, Vomat Courier might be okay.
Okay, so what does it do? What do they do?
So the Courier is a 1-mana 1/1 haste. It's an artifact, and when it attacks you, get to exile the top card of your library face down. You can pay a red and discard your hand and sacrifice the Courier, and you get to put all the cards that you exiled into your hand. So
that's really good because a lot of times you end up using up all your hand.
Exactly, and this could just refill your hand if they decide not to remove it. And it's tough though because as someone that would sit across from this, it's not really like hurting you a lot in the short run, but like for every time that you don't kill it and it gets to trigger and you don't block it, and it like your problem just gets worse.
Yeah, another card I think is really good. Karisef, Skyship Raider. She's 1 in a red for a legendary human pirate, 1/3 with first strike and menace. Whenever she attacks, create a legendary 2/1 red monkey creature token named Ragathon. That's tapped and attacking, and you exile that token at the end of combat. Every single time she attacks, she makes a body that's already attacking.
Mm-hmm.
And she's first strike menace. Hard to block.
So what I worry about these cards though is that they're not. This is a multiplayer format generally. I think this will be fine. I think these cards will be fine in a 1v1. But in a multiplayer setting, I would strongly consider like maybe playing bigger cards.
Like what?
So like Glorybringer, like that's a pretty aggressive card, but it's also like kind of like a mid-rangey threat too. It's a 5-mana 4/4 flying haste, and you can exert it when it attacks. And if you do decide to exert it, you can shoot something for 4. Only downside to exerting it though is that it doesn't untap. But I mean it's got flexibility though. It's a 5-mana evasive flying beater. It will kill someone very quickly, and it's a good example of a decent mid-range threat. Yeah.
Right, even when they're at 30 life. it's still a lot of damage coming at them.
Absolutely.
Hard to block too because flying in haste.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a really good aggro finisher, but it's not in red, it's in blue, which is very interesting. There might be a blue aggro deck somewhere that's waiting for us to discover. But this card is called Open into Wonder. It's X blue for sorcery. It says X target creature can't be blocked this turn. Until end of turn, those creatures gain whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. The draw card part doesn't really matter because you're killing them anyways. But X target creatures can be blocked this turn.
I think this card is actually decent though, even if you're not alpha striking with it, because it gives me a real Bind of Thassa feel. So even if you cast this thing for 3 and you connect 3, then I mean you're drawing 3 cards and getting in there with 3 guys like guaranteed. So even if it's not a finisher, this is a decent card to play in the mid game.
Well, what kind of deck would you play this in? Would you consider Merfolk as the green-blue Merfolk? Would you consider that as an aggro deck?
For this card in particular?
I mean, just that deck in general. If you have a blue-green Merfolk deck, would you play this card?
Probably.
Interesting. Maybe we'll find that deck.
Maybe.
Okay, so let's move on to control. Yeah, a little bit different from aggro, right? Like, we talked about the rock, paper, scissors. So control, in opposed to aggro, control is the slower of the 3.
Extremely.
The game plan of control deck is run by attrition, and which is why people really hate playing against them because it takes so long and it feels bad. But that aside, control decks love playing counter magic and removals. They basically stall out the game with those cards until they get a really strong late game finisher. And a lot of card draws to refill their hand. They really love card advantage. They will play a lot of board wipes, cheap premium removal. And one beautiful thing about control though, they don't play a lot of early threats.
They don't really play any, actually.
Well, yeah, they don't play any. Which means all the removals in the opponent's hand in the early game, they're just all blind. They're useless. A lot of virtual card advantage.
And typically the threats that the control player plays usually evade those common threat or common removal spells anyways. It's the ultimate form of card advantage by blanking your opponent's cards.
Yep. Hey, you're gripping onto that card. What does it say? It doesn't say anything because it doesn't do anything. Yep. Some of the really strong commanders for control players. Brawl Chief of Compliance is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 human wizard legendary creature. This guy is fun because you don't drop him on turn 2, but you drop him on turn 3. He reads instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, you loot.
You may loot. You don't have to loot.
You may loot. You don't have to. You play him on turn 2 with like negates or whatever counter magic in your hand, and they just proceed into playing their spells, and you just nope. It's the perfect Mother May I commander, and I love it.
This card reminds me a lot of Goblin Electromancer. In fact, this card is actually seen play in Modern Storm.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
It's the same effect as Goblin Electromancer, and it's just redundancy. Because before, obviously, there was only one card that did this on 2 mana, and that was Goblin Electromancer. But now, there's 4 more, so now, clearly, Storm is going to play all 8 copies of it.
Right, and Brawl is easy to cast, and 3 toughness. But to our format, though, perfect commander.
Right.
So that's an example that for a control commander that you can play early. But there are also control commanders that you can afford to play late because you love the late game. That's when you win. And
you say this. You bunch of sadists that play control.
I love control, but
you're a sadist.
Here's a commander. Why don't you, Jacob? Why don't you tell our audience about Azor the Lawbringer?
So Azor the Lawbringer is a 6-mana 6/6 flyer.
It pains him to read this card.
Kind of. I played a lot of control in my days too. When it enters the battlefield, All your opponents can't cast instants or sorceries on their own respective turns. And when it attacks, you can pay X, white, blue, blue. And if you do, you get to gain X life and draw X cards. Conveniently, this is literally Sphinx's Revelation on a stick.
Sphinx's Revelation on a stick.
I'm very fond of that card because while I am an aggressive player, my favorite standard was Theros Return to Ravnica. I played quite a bit of Esper Control and Blue-White Control. Blue-White Control is probably my favorite deck to play in that format. And I adored Sphinx's Revelation. I enjoyed playing Quicken into my board wipes. In that format, one of the strategies was to play Super Friends, which kind of, it was a mid-range deck, and it was a very slow mid-range deck, and the goal was to play Planeswalkers as many as you can, obviously. That's the goal of a Super Friends deck, so that you don't lose the control. You can continue generating value and threats with your Planeswalkers, and Esper Control would have a difficult time dealing with all of them, because they only ran 4 Heroes Downfalls. But not Blue-White Control. Blue-White Control played Planar Cleansing. One of my fondest memories was playing against a Super Friends opponent, and he had 3 different Planeswalkers out, and I went end of turn, Quicken Planar Cleansing, and he picked up everything, including his lands too. That was the funny part.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, as far as Azor the Lawbringer, obviously, if you can trigger the attack trigger, you're set. Like, Sphinx's Revelation on the stick is not to be underestimated.
The key is to be able to untap him, right?
Exactly. That's one of this creature's biggest weaknesses, that it doesn't have any way of protecting itself. It is pretty much out of range of like any burn, though. That is the upside. But that should be like the standard for creatures at this mana cost, though. This doesn't have the only immediate value that this card is getting is the instants and sorceries clause, and even then, I'm not sure if that's a very strong effect. That's very questionable, the effectiveness of that trigger, because, well, instants, well, you can just cast an instant on anybody's turn. Who cares? It doesn't have to be on your own. And sorceries, that might not even matter for half of your opponents on the board. They might just see like, oh, I have this sorcery, but like whatever, I'll just play my Planeswalker instead. This might not even be that good.
Right, like yeah. I think the good effects is the second effect, which completely refills your hand and like bring you back in the game. Like it gives you a bunch of life and draws you a bunch of cards, which is why the Revelation was good. And I actually think Azor, you don't play him on turn 6.
I'm sorry, did you say the instant part was the best part about the Sphinx Revelation?
No, I said the Sphinx's Revelation part is the best part of Azor.
Oh, okay. Well, the thing with Azor though is that this, the best part about Sphinx's Revelation was that it was instant speed, but here you're tied down to tapping out on your turn.
You're right.
I mean, I'm not saying that this is a poor card though. Like clearly, the ceiling level on this card is extremely high.
Yeah.
Those are just some things you wanna watch out for.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So a lot of cards that control player plays. You know, they're counter magic, they're removals. One of the strongest counter magic in the format is actually the Allow right now. Which not only counters. It costs 1 blue instant, like most counter spells, but it counters spells, activate abilities, and trigger abilities. And I think this is really important for a control deck to have.
I love it.
It stops combo.
Well, it stops everything. That's the point. I'm way more infatuated with this card than any normal person should be, to be honest.
Yeah, well, me too, but it's something else for me. Cause this was my pre-release promo.
Oh,
one of them.
I really enjoy niche cards and finding unlikely and ridiculous interactions. So
yeah, niche cards are fun to play around. Are you I didn't picture you as a Johnny player.
Oh, dude,
you're a Spike. You're a true Spike.
Well, it depends. I'm a Johnny Spike. So if I'm not playing to win, which is basically all the time nowadays, anyways, I'm a total Johnny. But if I'm trying to just even when I am trying to win, I almost want it to be on my terms. But I'm not willing I am willing to set aside a brew to play something better. I usually will try to brew something on my own though. I'll make a good attempt. I brewed my own Naya Zoo deck for a Star City Games regionals tournament, and
Nice.
yeah, I finished top 8 in that one. That was I finished top 8
Nice.
back to back on both regionals. And I took Naya Zoo to that. That's when Reckless Bushwhacker first came out.
Oh my gosh, that
Yep.
card's good.
So I went through about 17 deck iterations, and after 50 hours of testing, I finally came up with what I believe to be the most optimal list, and took it in top 8, and swiftly lost to my worst matchup.
Jesus Christ.
And I'll take it. I made a few $100 that day.
That's good.
Yeah.
Alright, so let's finish up Control with some of the finishers that Control player like me would love. There's this card called Cruel Reality.
Is that because you're a sadist? Is it okay if I just tap one of the swamps and say Thought Sees You? I have a friend of mine. We were playtesting in my dorm one day, and this is when Siege Runner first came out, so Theros was still in Standard. This is important. So I go turn 1, tap my swamp, and just say Thought Sees You, but I don't actually have a Thought Sees. He lays out his whole hand and looks at his phone.
Gosh.
And after a good 30 seconds, he's like, "Are you gonna take something?" I'm like, "I was just kidding. I don't actually have a Thought Sees." He picked up his hand. It was...
you know, as a judge, I can disqualify you. I can issue you a game loss right there if it's Cumro.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'd probably still risk it anyway. No, I'm.
Oh
No,
my gosh.
Don't do that, please, guys. Let's be ethical here. It's only a children's card game.
Okay, so Cruel Reality is an enchantment that costs 5 black, and it has enchant player as a curse, or a curse. At the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature, a planeswalker. If the player can't, he or she loses 5 life.
So
This card is amazing.
So what I actually really like about this card is that it's not a you may pay 5 life to have this effect not happen. That's in my eyes, that's the only saving grace of this card. Like, they have to sacrifice a creature or a planeswalker if they have one. Like, they can't just pay 5 to negate this effect. I think that's really, really crucial for this card.
Yeah, imagine if someone's playing a Voltron Brawl deck. Like, meaning, like, just one commander, put all the pants on that commander, and that's the deck. You play Cruel Reality, they're just done. They can't play.
This enchantment also really hurts top end decks, really slow, inefficient decks, as we mentioned with the efficiency and mana cost. So the decks that are only able to play 1 thing a turn, even 2 things a turn, this is really gonna hurt. The 7 mana, yeah, it is a steep upfront cost, but you will get that mana back effectively in probably 2 turns if you pick your target wisely.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of control top end cards are like this. It's really strong effects that's really hard to deal with, and you just can't find a lot of room for enchantment removal in a brawl deck nowadays. Because in Commander, when it's 100 card singleton, you can have like 2 or 3, maybe just 1 or 2 in your entire deck. There's no room, and when you have 60 cards, you can play 1.
Even so, I think it might be a good goal to try and find some room. I think it's possible.
Yeah, I always put in that naturalize if I play green. Anyways, that's control. Let's move on to the last archetype in the rock paper scissors wheel, which is not combo. We'll be talking about mid range. The deck we built last week, the Rich Card deck, was a mid range deck. What does mid range do?
Well, as I explained earlier, mid-range typically likes to play a mixture of efficient creatures, yet they are somewhat top-end, just so that they are able to compete with the control decks in the format. They're bigger than aggro. That's important, so that they can go over aggro and they can beat them down and stabilize. Not in that order. But they're also able to to go under the control decks and not run out of value. It's really crucial for the mid-range decks to be able to switch, almost switch modes. And obviously for each deck they have their own varying degree of which side they'll lean on, and that's kind of up to the pilot. And in competitive formats, when you have a sideboard, the sideboard is the mid-range players. It's their bread and butter, really. Like that's how they compete. Like against control, they'll go even bigger. They'll remove some of their low-end threats, and against aggro, they'll remove some of their top end. So we don't have a sideboard in this format. But even so, I believe that being a mid-range deck in this format is going to be key. Just because the way that you're able to construct your deck, you can survive against the early aggressive strategies while still having a chance in the late.
Right, absolutely. You can identify mid-range creatures pretty easily. Here's this card. I call it the Little Fractus. Armorback Stomper is a 3 green creature beast, 5/4, trample. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life. So what does that say? It says, whatever you did to me, aggro deck, I kind of nullify that. And, control deck, I'm going to beat your face down.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of a mid-range threat. And honestly, I like to call this card the Little Thragtusk that couldn't.
Yeah, the 3/3 is not there.
Yeah. That was like one of the biggest things that Thragtusk had going for it. And especially in the standard format, when you could abuse that with Restoration Angel and reanimation targets and spells, that was insane.
Yeah. Nonetheless, I think still an alright card. But they're even better card in our format. Rishkar obviously is a good example of a commander. Why don't you talk about this other commander that we can play as a mid-range commander?
So Nissa, Steward of Elements. One thing I'd like to point out is that this card, if you're just looking at it, it might look like Steward of Elements because the rod is like covering up the letter in the title.
Oh my gosh.
But it's. I think this is a really interesting casting mechanic. It actually costs X blue green, and it comes in with X loyalty counters. And I think this is an amazing mechanic, and I hope to see more of this type of system. Because this can come down as early as turn 3. I mean, barring any other special effects, and it'll have one loyalty point. If it's late game and you don't have anything else to do, you can sink all your mana and give Nissa like maybe 10 loyalty counters, you know? So I think with regard to the casting cost, that was really well done.
It's the first good commander does 2 CMC.
Absolutely. Maybe even...
You remember Tibble, right?
Oh, dude. Let's not talk about Tibble.
Okay, so why is Nissa a good mid-range commander?
So she doesn't really have a ton of ways of protecting herself, but her +2 lets you scry too. I mean that's a pretty decent ability. Like if this is turn 3 and you tick up to 3 from 1 loyalty counter, scrying 2, it's an okay effect. It doesn't protect her though. That's one of the main issues though. Her 0 ability, which I should note, does not actually remove any loyalty counters from her, and that is another critical part of this card. It kind of lets you like draw cards. If you would reveal a card from the top of your library, after activating the 0 costing Planeswalker ability, if the card that you reveal costs less than the amount of loyalty counters on Nissa, then you get to draw it.
So it's not only drawing the card,
excuse
because
me, no,
it actually goes on the battlefield.
You go on the battlefield, yeah.
Yeah, it cheats mana cost, and that's really good.
So you're definitely rewarded for stacking your deck and having a lot of loyalty counters on Nissa. This 0 ability effectively just lets you draw 2 cards a turn if you have enough loyalty counters on it.
Absolutely. And she does it all by herself.
Yep, and finally, we have her ultimate ability, which is -6. Not that much, and in fact, the cool thing is that if this is a late game mana sink, you can end up ulting right away. It says that you can untap up to 2 target lands you can control, and they get to become 5/5 creatures with flying and haste until end of turn. So, it's not the best ultimates, but it's 10 damage in the air at instant speed. And if you're really, really, really in the late game and for whatever reason Nissa has a lot of Planeswalker counters on it, then you can use this to ramp too.
Okay, so this doesn't matter in our format, but I'm just wondering, when Nissa targets Inkmoth Nexus, what happens?
So if you were to target Inkmoth Nexus, what would need to happen is, I believe, the ordering.
You need to make it a 1/1 flyer first, and then you make it a 5/5.
I think so. I think so. Well, no. Maybe it's the other way around. Let me pull up Inkmoth Nexus exactly what it says. I mean, most of us should know what Inkmoth Nexus does effectively, but with a game like Magic the Gathering, like the wording is everything. I don't think they're compatible. I think either way you slice it, if you animate the land first, and then activate Nissa, it becomes a 5/5 elemental creature. Well, I'm not sure if it loses the keyword, so I'm not sure about this one.
So as a judge, I can tell you it still has impact if you turn it into a 1/1 first. But if you turn it into 5/5 first, the moment you activate it to give it impact, it no longer has.
That's what I was thinking. I'm pretty sure either way you slice it, like this isn't gonna work the way you want it to.
So sad.
Yeah. As an ex-judge, I concur.
Yep. Okay, why don't we move into the last archetype? This is not in the wheel of rock paper scissors. This is more like in the Lizard Spock kind of area.
It is, but it isn't. Like it's kind of like the I don't want to say the
it's
third.
A wild card.
I don't want to say the third wheel because there's only 3 arcs, so I'll say the fourth wheel. Get it?
It's the wild card of the archetypes. That's how I would put it. Here's a common denominator of all combo players. They're all good solitaire players.
I think that's a good description. And the tough part about combo is that, well, so in our rock paper scissors economy, you have one beating one losing to another, and it's even 50-50 with the third. That's not the case with combo. So combo loses to 2 and is even with the mirror and beats out mid-range. And the reason being is that combo, generally, they aren't fast enough to go off, so they get under control, and control usually plays all the removal spells, all those counter spells, and they can counter and disrupt all the important pieces and mechanisms that combo needs to go off. Aggro players have a very easy time going under combo because combo they just play with themselves until they go off, and typically aggro can get under them, no problem. Mid-range is really the only one that suffers.
Right. Here's another thing about combo decks. Aggro, control, and mid-range all interact with other players. They are either proactive or they're reactive. Combo ignores the other player.
Until post board.
There's no sideboard in this format.
Got him.
Yep, got him.
So
combo.
And due to the nature of this format just being singleton, combo is going to be extremely difficult to play anyways. I'm not saying that it can't. I'm not saying it can't happen. That's not what I'm trying to say. But
right.
It'll be much more difficult and also that much more impressive if you can pull it up. So if you have a good combo list, send it to us.
Send it to us. You can send it to us at brawlingpitmtg@gmail.com.
Buy a
or
t-shirt.
tweet us at brawlingpit.
Buy our merchandise.
Buy a t-shirt.
Wait, do we have t-shirts?
Absolutely.
We don't have t-shirts yet.
No, we don't. Not yet.
No, we don't.
I can make some, but maybe.
Oh, wait. So you're saying I'm selling out, but we don't even have anything to sell it yet. Oh, all right.
Keep selling it. Why not? But
subscribe to our page. Wait, we don't even have that either.
We don't have that yet. No. So. A good combo though. I think I have one. It's easy because it's only 2-card combo. Oh, by the way, I don't think the commander matters at all. Unless if the commander is the combo piece, the commander doesn't matter. But here's a good combo. Well, that's currently in standard.
I think it would be wise to start looking into commanders as a combo piece because, as we mentioned last episode, you always have your commander. It's in the command zone. You don't need to draw into it. You just have it. And if it were to die or leave the battlefield, you always can decide to put it right back into the command zone.
That's true.
And if you'd like to learn more about the basics of Brawl, you should check out our previous episode.
Absolutely. We talked everything about Brawl. Okay.
In addition to Jonathan's mother.
Yes. So
leave me hanging.
Here is a combo that actually involves a commander fireable card. Yahini Undying Harrison. He's a 2 and a black for a Etherborn Vampire 2/2 with haste. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Yahini Undying Partition. None of that matters. Here's what matters.
It's
sacrifice
partisan,
another creature.
It says partisan, not partition.
Oh, partisan. You're right. I'm almost legally blind. But sacrifice another creature. Yahini gets indestructible until end of turn. Indestructible part does not matter. sacrifice another creature.
Hold on.
If it only says that, that's fine.
Hold on. I need to intervene. Okay. I think what you're saying about Yahini is very rude. Like, what if I just said, or what if I just started listing off all of your important qualities about you as a person and just said it doesn't matter? Like, how would you feel?
I would feel good because that means I'm a combo piece.
Wow.
No, I won't.
Exactly.
But here's why Yahini is a crazy good combo. Here are the other 3 combo pieces. We have Bontu's Monument, which says black creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Both of these are important qualities of the Monument. Another combo piece, Pitiless Plunderer, 3 in a black, 1/4, human pirate. Doesn't matter. Whenever another creature you control dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sack, and artifacts. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Last piece. Oathsworn Vampire, 1 in black. Vampire Knight 2/2. Does not matter. Comes in tapped. You may cast Oathsworn Vampire from your graveyard if you gain life this turn. Did you see it? Do you see the combo yet? Do you see it?
Well, considering I have these cards visually pulled up on my screen, yes, I literally see it.
So what's the combo?
So, just for anybody that didn't quite catch on to it yet, which if you're not visually looking at these cards, very understandable that you wouldn't catch it yet.
But if you want to visually look at these cards, go to our YouTube channel at Brawling.
Right. So the combo is that Yahini acts as a sacrificial outlet. Bontu's Monument acts as a discounter for mana. Now, what's also important is that the Monument drains 1 life every time you cast a creature spell. The Pitiless Plunderer is another mechanism that ensures you go off, because every time something that you control dies, it gives you a mana, effectively. And the vampire is the target in all of this, and this is what enables you to go off. So what you do is you sacrifice the Oathsworn Vampire. When you sacrifice it, you get 1 mana from the Plunder. Now what you're able to do is you're able to recast the vampire, so long as you gain some life in this turn. That is one prerequisite. You have to have gained some life before going off with this. And when you cast this, the Bontu's Monument go off, and you gain your life, and your opponent loses a life, and you're able to cast this Oathsworn Vampire for just a black because of the Monument's first static ability. Your creatures cost 1 less, and because of the drain, it's just a 1-turn kill.
Yeah, it's infinite, right? It's an infinite combo in center.
It is an infinite combo, but it's never going to be infinite. It's probably only going to be like 20 at most, 30.
It's a cool combo, though. It goes infinite.
It is a cool combo.
Yeah. I mean, against that life gain deck, right? That 1 life gain deck, there's always one.
That 1 life gain deck.
That 1 life gain deck. Here's another combo that's exciting, and it only requires 2 cards.
About time.
The commander doesn't matter if you're playing this combo. It just the only thing that matters is you need green and red, because Forerunner of the Empire is 3 in a red, 1/3 creature human soldier. Whenever Forerunner of the Empire enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a dinosaur card, reveal it, then shuffle the library and put the card on top of it. Whenever a dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Forerunner of the Empire deals 1 damage to each creature. What is the tutor target of the Forerunner, Jacob?
Honestly, I'd have to probably say it's the Polyraptor.
Is it in our deck?
I mean, it should be if it's not. So Polyraptor, just if you don't know, Polyraptor is an 8-mana dinosaur. Yeah. I mean,
it's
8 mana.
8 for 5/5.
I'm not a big fan of dinosaurs, but hear me out, okay? Here's what Polyraptor does. It's an 8 mana 5/5, right? But it has Enrage, so that means whenever it's dealt damage, you get to create a token copy of Polyraptor. Alright, now, just for your convenience, I've already worked out the headache of, like, trying to map out the stack and what happens, and just letting you know, this combo by itself with these 2 cards, you get 7 5/5s. That's a lot.
Yeah, you do get 7 5/5s. So that's 35 power and toughness.
If you play it in that Naya hero that we mentioned earlier, Samut, all of them get haste.
Samut.
Yeah.
They have haste.
Yeah.
But after you get the 7 Polyraptors, Forerunner will have died, and Sam will have 3 damage counter on her.
Yep.
Still a lot of damage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we complete the combo?
What do you mean complete the combo?
So 1 and a green for an instant called Heroic Intervention. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn.
Alright, so tell me when exactly you would put this on here, because once this resolves, all the new dinosaurs that you would make do not have this trait.
They do. They still take damage.
Do they still? So if you were to make new dinosaurs after Heroic Intervention resolves, do the new dinosaurs have indestructible?
No, they don't.
There you go.
However, the 7 that were already there,
They do.
they can go infinite.
They can go infinite.
They can go infinite.
The only issue is that if you decide to go infinite, you may draw the game.
Yeah, that's right. You will probably draw the game.
But it's for the banter. You gotta do it.
You gotta do it. I mean, like, here's what's better than winning the game, right? You draw the game. No one wins.
No hard feelings. Nobody
No one
won.
wins. No hard feelings. Yep. No, definitely not like 3 hours wasted. It's just great. Just great. That's a great combo.
It is a great combo. I mean, I don't even care if you draw. I'd pull this off. Even if I'm winning, I'd still do it.
So yeah, so those are the 4 main archetypes that I would say on a high level, almost all Magic decks will fall into one of these 4.
And we only say almost all just so that, we can't get that little sneaky comment. What about this deck?
Yeah, what about that deck?
Someone's gonna do it. I'm waiting for the comment to happen. Someone's gonna do it.
Yeah, I cannot think of one that doesn't fall into these, one of these 4. But if you find one, tell us.
Be semantic, and we'll take it on the chin, and well, actually, we probably won't. I mean, you might, but I'm not going to.
So yeah, let's move to our next topic. What and how do you build around a commander? Like, how do you know what your commander wants you to do? Say you really want to build around Temet.
Well, the first thing I would do is I'd sit down and I'd prop my commander up on a chair and offer him some coffee and ask him, what do you want me to do? That's the first thing I'd do. It requires an intense amount of spiritual energy and concentration and meditation, but you must become one with your children's cards and really listen and dig deep down to understand what it is your cards want you to do. And once you can hear them talking to you, you need to go see a doctor.
Or you just actually.
That was a great setup. Don't.
That's actually pretty good. Yeah. Or you can actually just it actually tells you right there on the card. Reading the card explains the card.
What if the card's in a foreign language?
Oh, then you're out. I'll say you look it up on Gatherer.
But how are you supposed to look it up on Gather if you don't know how to write it?
I don't know. Ask your foreign friends.
Implying that any of our audiences have foreign friends.
Absolutely.
They don't.
So let's say we are building around Temet, like I said. It's actually pretty easy to identify what he wants, because on the card it says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature token you control get +1/+1 until end of turn and can be blocked this turn. It means there's a keyword on the card saying token. You want to go token strategy with this card, right?
No.
But what about but not all commanders are as obvious as Temet. Here's an example.
Temet's easy.
For us, Temet's easy. Here's an example though. Vraska Relic Seeker, 4 black-green for a legendary planeswalker. She comes in with 6 loyalty counters, +2, create a 2/2 black pirate creature token with menace. Pirate is not a keyword, no.
No.
-3. Destroy target artifact, creature, or enchantment. Create a treasure artifact token with, whatever the treasure usually says.
So, as a competitive player, I'm actually a certified card whisperer. right? So you have horse whispers, right? I'm a card whisperer, right?
Okay.
So I know this card is already speaking to me, and that once again that
Okay.
probably means I need to go see a doctor. But holding that off, this card is telling me just play a good green-black mid-range deck. So it doesn't also have to be cryptic either. Like sometimes it can be really obvious, but like sometimes it's so obvious, and you're looking for something that's just not there.
Well, yeah, a lot of times yes. But don't ignore her out though. Her alt actually does things.
Right.
Target player's life total becomes 1.
There is a Soren card. Set a player's life total to 10.
Yeah, which is a lot higher than 1, I think.
10 times higher than 1.
About 10 times.
Exactly
9 higher?
10. No, exactly 10 times higher.
Like 9 higher, right?
Well,
I think most of the time.
Yes.
In most worlds. Yeah. Yeah. And it's about 10 billion higher in the 2 space. In binary space.
What?
Yeah.
Depends on where you are along the bits. In the magnitude.
Yep, absolutely. So, how do you protect Faraska until 10 loyalty counters, right? Like, when I look at this card, like, that's what the card screams at me.
And
hey,
she
protect
has
her.
Yeah, and it helps. This is an example of a good planeswalker too. Is that her abilities help protect herself. So even if you don't have a board, you can still make a 2/2 chump blocker.
Another thing is, how do you deal the last damage? Right? You put someone at 1, they're still alive. How do you take that off?
Well, usually games of Magic are won through combat damage, so I'd imagine something to do with that.
Or in Black, you can just like drain life, maybe.
Nah. Nah.
I would say those are things to think about, right? Like you look at the
but
card
on
and
a
you just
serious
think
note,
about.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you just look at the card and think about different scenarios, how to make this card good. I think that's a big part
Even
about
if you don't decide
finding
to make
a commander.
Even if you don't decide to make Vraska your general, she's still an excellent addition to any green-black mid-range deck.
I think so. Why don't we talk about another commander that requires some thinking to build around, Jacob? We can talk about this card called the Scarab God. In fact,
why don't you tell me what the Scarab God does?
The Scarab God is a 5/5, 3 blue-black legendary creature god. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses X life and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. Here's his abilities. 2 blue-black, exile target creature card from a graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie.
One thing about that card that screams to me is that it doesn't have to be your graveyard either.
It does not. You can eternalize creatures from an opponent's graveyard. And another thing that's really good, by the way, as a side note, that the reason why this is probably one of the strongest commander in the format is because when it dies, you can return it to your hand at the beginning of your next end step. No commander tax is pretty good. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. And then
absolutely.
And if it were to get exiled or any other undesirable event, you can always decide to put it back into the command zone as a last resort.
Yeah, easy. We actually love this commander so much that Jacob built a deck around it.
Right, so
tell us about the deck, Jacob.
Well, typically deck building can take anywhere from 15 minutes to multiple days or even weeks. But we've already put the effort in ahead of time, and we have one pre-built here, just like on a generic cooking show on television.
Oh my gosh.
So, the outlook that I took on this deck was just to build a value-based control deck. It doesn't play a ton of creatures. It plays 14 if you include the commander, but 13 in the 59 card deck. And each creature is just dripping with value. Everything that this deck plays has a purpose and will generate some amount of value. All the creatures, as far as I'm concerned, have some sort of value enter the battlefield ability, which synergize extremely well with the Scarab God, because you can effectively echo that enter the battlefield ability with its Embalm activated ability.
Right. Let's talk about some of the key cards. So this key card is actually a common. Ravenous Chupacabra.
Oh, so Ravenous Chupacabra is also really amazing in that it's a 4-mana 2/2, and you can kill something when it enters the battlefield. And then if it dies, you can reanimate it with Scarab God, and you can get it back and kill something else. So that's already an amazing piece of value. But what's really awesome too is just remember that anything you kill with the Ravenous Chupacabra or the Noxious Scarehulk, you get to you have the option to reanimate yourself with the Scarab God's activated ability.
Oh my gosh, that's so broken.
It is.
Yeah, you can reanimate your opponent's things too. Oh my gosh.
So all your kill spells are doubly effective. It's literally the zombie apocalypse, and that when something falls, it joins the ranks of the undead.
Right, and so does your counter spells, right? Because when you counter something, they also put it in their graveyards.
It's quite a synergistic deck, actually. It may seem like a generic blue-black control-y do-nothing deck, but in reality, it can get very proactive starts and can close out games very quickly, because every single part of the Scarab God is utilized. There are a few zombies in here to facilitate that upkeep trigger, get that clock going, and also scry to ensure that your card quality is always top notch, even in the end game. And just as a note, when you do reanimate things, they are a zombie too. So for everything you reanimate and for every zombie that you play, and there are a few of them in this deck, not too many, you are improving your position significantly beyond just making your board state larger with 4/4s and any enter the battlefield abilities they might have.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just to play with the your cards are my cards and my cards are my cards theme, there's also Gonti, Lord of Luxury.
What does Gonti do? Why don't you tell us about it? I built the deck, but why don't you tell us about it anyways?
Gonti is a 2/black for 2/3 Everborn work. He has Death Touch. And when Gonti enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target opponent's library. Exile one of them face down, and put the rest on the bottom of the library in a random order. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may look at it, and you may cast it, and you may pay mana as though it were mana of any type to cast it. So basically, you can exile something off the top 4 of your opponent's deck, and you get to play with that card. It doesn't have to be creature, because your deck, this deck loves taking creatures, but now you even take sorceries or instants or enchantments, like anything. You can just take it.
And you know, on the topic of taking things and the your cards are my cards theme, we're also playing Hostage Taker, and that's a 4-mana 2/3, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to exile an artifact or a creature until it leaves the battlefield. So it has an O-ring effect. However, you can cast the card as long as it remains exiled underneath the Hostage Taker, and you can spend any color of mana as to cast that card. So we're really, really just stealing everybody's cards.
Oh my gosh. And for the finisher, if the creatures are not enough, I actually saw that you have the ultimate combo in the deck. Ultimate combo.
Yes.
You have Revel in Riches.
And if you'd like to know what Revel in Riches does, you'll have to watch our first episode.
Yeah, you can either watch it on YouTube at Brawling Pit, or you can listen to it at brawlingpit.com.
Subscribe to our Patreon. But wait, we don't have one here. Never mind.
But Revel in Riches basically gives you a bunch of treasures. When you have 10 treasures, you win. 5 minutes does nothing. But you also have Bontu's Last Reckoning. It's probably the best board wipe, the earliest board wipe in any format. It's 1 black sorcery. Destroy all creatures.
And
That's good.
the key thing to keep in mind with this the sweeper is you have to pick the time very, very wisely. You can't just throw it out
Why
there.
is that?
Well, I mean, it says so on the card. You have to be careful. You're gonna shoot yourself in the foot if you don't. Because your stuff doesn't untap next turn after you cast it.
Yeah, your land's still untap.
So,
which is really good because who cares if you untap if you're gonna win with Revel and Riches anyways? Am I right?
exactly. So always follow up your Revel and Riches with a sweeper because your opponents won't have the stones to.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As mentioned many times, you can find us at Twitter at Brawling Pit, on Facebook at Brawling Pit. You can email us at brawlingpitmtg@gmail.com, or you can listen to us on brawlingpit.com. Watch us on YouTube as well.
Subscribe to our Patreon.
As always, we don't have one.
Buy our t-shirts.
Oh my gosh. As always, it's been...
We don't have
as
t-shirts
always,
yet.
No, we don't have t-shirts yet. It's been Johnathan and Jacob, signing out. So, Jacob,
What's
you know
up?
anyone in your life who was so convincing? Like, it's like they can twist your arm just enough to get you to do something for them, to make it so that they don't seem pushy, but it actually works, and you don't like it.
Well, my
like
dad beat me up when I was a kid. Did that count?
I don't think that's the same kind of manipulation that I'm trying to get at, but okay. So let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you what happened.
I'm kidding, by the way. That didn't actually happen. But go on.
Absolutely. So I have a friend. He owns a game store, and I'm not gonna disclose any names here, but
Jim from down the street.
yes, Jim from down the street. Jim has a pre-release coming up, right, for Dominaria, and one day when we were just texting casually, he texted, "Oh, by the way, we have this." And he just sent me this picture. Here's what that picture says. Register for 1 player, pre-release Dominaria, for $25. And then there's this package called I Hate Sleep Package, $70. And then I Am Dominaria, you get a box, and you get 3 pre-release events entries for $165. And he stopped texting me after that. I look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, Jim, what are you doing to me?
Yeah, I think he's trying to advertise to you. I think he wants your money.
I think he wants my money. I know he wants my money. So I'm like, okay.
I'm
not going to do it.
Have you considered? Yeah, I was going to say, just don't do it.
Yeah, for the next 7 days, I kept stopping myself to go to his game store. I love his game store, but I don't want to go there because of this. And then finally, one day I snapped. I'm like, all right, goddamn. I walked in. I talked to the person. I'm gonna get the 3rd package, the 3rd bundle, and he doesn't even know how to do it. He has to call Jim. And Jim answers her phone, is like, who's buying that? And, the clerk answered that as, it's Johnathan Tang. So here's what he texted me at the end of the day. It's about damn time.
You're a terrible customer. You should vote with your wallet, and you can't even do that
Dude.
right.
Dude, he knew the whole time that I was gonna do it.
Oh my goodness.
Oh
Have
my
you considered
goodness.
just being a better, strong-willed customer?
I have.
What was
But-
the result of your consideration?
I get to play 3 Dominaria pre-release events, and I get a box.
I don't think that's worth it.
Probably not. But hey, at least I can die happy
Oh my
because I am
God.
Dominaria.
Wow.